Yeah.
Didn't work last time, so we'll see what happens. It's all up for grabs, I guess. All right. Are you ready to go?
Yes.
There was one podcast I did where I had started the video and we were like still prepping, and so there were like bloopers at the end because I was like, I gotta fix my hair, and she was like looking at her notes, so like I got it all together.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was so fun. All right, so I'm gonna click record over here, and then we'll get started. Awesome. So we should. Yep. All right, let's go. Okay. Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Tiny Fit Diva podcast. I'm Kylene Terhune, your host. I'm a certified personal trainer and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. I'm really excited for the podcast today. I have Melody with me, and we are going to talk about some really exciting things today. I think we share a lot of the same passions in terms of functional health. And so I'm just going to do a short little intro for you, for those who don't know you. Melody is a clinical pharmacist at Western Medicine Family Physicians in Fairborn, Ohio. She also teaches part-time at Cedarville University School of Pharmacy. It's very impressive. Yes. She enjoys using a functional medicine approach whenever possible and works regularly with patients struggling with chronic disease. She's currently a board-certified asthma educator, board-certified ambulatory care pharmacy specialist, and board-certified in advanced diabetes management. Those are all as a mouthful. I know, that's a lot. I feel like it's so much fun though to keep getting certifications and to keep learning more, and you keep rounding out your education. You can keep helping people. But when I was looking at your bio, I maybe we had talked about it before, but you specialize in diabetes management. Like that's a big focus.
It's a big focus for my practice in the physical practice in Dayton. So I do a lot of management of insulin and other medications for our practice. So the family medicine physicians just consult me within our group, and then patients can see me to follow up on those things because there's so much involved with diabetes, from diet, supplements, exercise. Like the physician, when they have 15 minutes to talk to someone, they cannot cover all of those things. So it's really good because then it allows me to help them focus on that, and then the physician can help them with other things when they see their regular provider. So we also include a dietitian in our practice, and so we have a well-rounded.
That's amazing. I feel like that's not normal. Am I wrong?
No, but it's not necessarily normal. But there's enough pharmacists doing it across the country that they've created a board certification in the ambulatory care pharmacist. But cool. But yeah, there's probably a handful across Dayton, and then there's even more across the state. A lot more in like larger health systems, and the VA actually was sort of the pioneers in using pharmacists in those areas. But like in small practices, it's not as common.
That's pretty cool. That sounds just really exciting to me. Anytime I think there can be the medical community can work together with people who are going to coach and work on nutrition and just give more information in general, because you're not always doing functional medicine. I mean, you're still on the conventional side as well.
Sometimes we need drugs. If people have been drinking Mountain Dew for 20 years and not exercising, there's only so much you can do to recover your body. And actually, one of my favorite pediatricians is an integrated pediatrician in Columbus, and she says that's why she does peds, is because she can reverse things with functional medicine approaches so much easier because they haven't had so many years of the detrimental effects on their body. So
that makes so much sense. Kids, they heal very quickly. And that's really it is fun to see that. Just the smallest little change. So tell me a little bit about you. Who are you?
So
Melody.
Besides the day pharmacist, I have two kids. So Kinley is 4 and Kellen is 16 months, almost 17 months actually, which is hard to believe. So we enjoy traveling, and I taught a study abroad elective on diabetes, and in Spain summer when Kelly was 2, so right before I got pregnant with Kellen. And so we're hoping to do that again this spring, so we'll be able to take some students over and live in Valencia again.
That is so cool.
It was so awesome. My daughter loved it.
Super jealous right now.
That
sounds awesome.
So I'm trying to get everything together so that can happen again and we can get enough students. So we do love to travel. Spain is one of our favorite places just because we've spent a lot of time there as a family. And then besides traveling, we like to spend a lot of time outside and things like that. Normal, hiking and spending time at the pool, just spending time with family. But I love pictures and photography, so I'm trying to learn a little bit more for that for my blog. But unfortunately, it's sort of like the last thing on my to-do list
I feel
right
like
now.
though, when you're trying to manage a social media account, oh my gosh, it's so much pressure in terms of I have to make it look pretty. There's so many people out there. You can have the best information in the world, and then, but if your pictures aren't pretty, it's like someone just scrolls right by. It's so much pressure. Why? We should just be able to put the good word out there.
I know. Yeah, so I'm trying to get better at that. I got a new lens last Christmas.
Oh, that's cool. My husband got me a camera for my birthday this year. It's cool. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be getting better. But there's like all kinds of resources out there. It's just having, when 2 kids, like, and I'm still waking up a couple times a night because my son's teething. So it's like, okay, we're just in survival mode for a little while.
Right. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. I'm glad you brought it up, some of the things that you're really passionate about, and so we're going to talk about the gut health a lot of like children, right? Which is really, really cool, and like you said, so valuable to focus on because you can catch things, you can reverse things, they can heal so quickly. I've shared with the listeners on my podcast about my son and the health struggles that he's had in the past year and how quickly he responded when we put in the right protocol and the right nutrition for him. And so that's been really exciting to watch. But just generally speaking, there's so many allergies popping up. More and more kids have ADHD. I mean, they're sensitive to peanuts and red food dye and this, that, and the other. We know that diet and lifestyle can play a huge part in that. But how much does like the health of the mother, for example, go into transferring that into the child?
There's a lot of research right now, and I mean we could probably spend hours.
That's its own podcast.
On that. But essentially, a lot of the core things are coming down to like there's omega-3 deficiencies. We have a world that's eating a lot more omega-6 versus omega-3, so we have more inflammatory foods. And so they found that mothers that have a better supply of omega-3s, whether that's supplement or a diet, have kids with less of these allergic disorders and less, kids with less risk of wheezing. And that's even just in utero, not even after the child is born or after the child started breastfeeding. And so obviously, we know folate and folic acid is really important because, we've known that for a long time. And we're learning more about, certain gene mutations that are affecting the metabolism of folic acid. And so some patients need like that activated or the methylated folate products instead of the regular folic acid. There's been some studies that actually show if they have too much of that folic acid in their system, there's actually an increased risk of allergies as well.
So you're talking about, is that the MTHFR gene? Okay, so if someone has, so one thing to think about is if you have the MTHFR gene, you may need methylated folate.
So a lot of the supplement companies, Designs for Health, Thorne, Orthomolecular, they all have, a prenatal product that should have a methylated folate in it. So if those patients would take something with lots of folic acid in it and that folic acid isn't able to metabolize, that can actually increase risk of allergies and things like that for their children. There was one study that showed like the plasma folic acid, unmetabolized folic acid levels were higher in kids, in utero, in the bloodstream for the mom, and then later on. So so
it's a simple change.
I know, right?
Different
version of prenatals, and I'm not sure that those are even a commercially available products. Like because most people get their prenatal from their OB/GYN, and then they go to the pharmacy and pick it up, and so
it's like $3.
So it's really cheap. But so sometimes convincing someone that they need to take something that's $30 or $45 a month, versus that $3 a month is hard. But it definitely might pay off in the long run. There's also some discussion about the increased risk or increase in the tongue and lip time being related to the MTHFR mutation and folic acid metabolism. Some people are saying it's genetic. Some people say it's related to that.
You're talking about like that little right in between your teeth and your lip where it kind of holds it together.
Right. Yeah. So some people, actually, both my kids had a tight, upper lip and the tongue, so they both had to get it released with a dental procedure like after they were born that helps them breastfeed better. But some people are thinking that that's related to the folic acid and some of the genetic gene mutations too. But I don't know.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know that they've really determined the exact cause of that. But I think the more we learn about all this, that's the hard thing is we know so many bits and pieces of things that sometimes we feel overwhelmed, especially when you become pregnant and there's all these different recommendations. Right. This person's saying this, and this person's saying this. Like, what do you believe?
Yeah.
But looking at the evidence that we have, I think omega-3s are really important. So making sure that mom has a good balanced diet with less inflammatory foods, lots of omega-3 fatty acids from food, but also making sure they take DHA. We know a lot of evidence links that back to proper development of the neurological systems. And then also like supporting their gut. So I think that's, the biggest thing. We know that the children, when they're born, mom transfers. So as the child comes through the vaginal canal, they swallow fluid, and that sort of starts to seed their gut. So obviously when they're out, they're going to be encountering things, whether that's from a pacifier or from, something they picked up on the floor. And so, so there's lots of things that they're going to be encountering. And with your second child, it's definitely more than the 5-second rule. The first child, it's like, oh, let's sterilize everything. And maybe that's why my daughter has more food allergies than my son. But, if the mom's gut isn't healthy, she's not going to transfer healthy bacteria to the child. Or the vaginal fluid, because it's really, they're swallowing in the vaginal canal. And so, vaginal fluid is a similar makeup of bacteria. More of those lactobacillus bacteria, that the women's formula type things that we see, acidophilus. So I guess in my story is that, I had, I did not eat like I should have as a teenager, as a child. We ate out a lot.
You did.
Growing up, antibiotics were just sort of like, oh, you need an antibiotic, you're sick, So I had frequent antibiotics, at least once a year, and never, I don't even remember ever like hearing about probiotics, as a younger person. And so all of that time, damaged the gut, plus then stressful college, so I went to pharmacy school,
Was college not like the most stressful experience ever? I'm sure for me it was a completely different reason than it was for you, but that was such a stressful time in my life.
Yeah, I think it's
I think
going out on your own.
At that age, you're away from your parents,
Right, it's the first time you're really making decisions by yourself, and then the fact that you're studying
and all my decisions were stupid. So you had that going on.
Right. So, I had gotten put on birth control to regulate cycles, and so that messes with your gut, it messes with your hormones, it caused reflux, so all those kinds of things. So it took me a while to like rebalance things after that. But then I was pretty fine. I was eating well. I was doing paleo for a while. I finally used some supplements and helped me get pregnant with my daughter. And then after my pregnancy, we had sort of an unplanned induction. It's not sort of, it was an unplanned induction, and not exactly the ideal birth plan. This is a whole nother story, but my doula was in jail the day that I went to the hospital to be induced.
Doulas sound like you think of a doula, you think about this nice
lady
that's like so holistic and like hippie, right?
Yes.
And then you're like, my doula was in jail.
I know. I feel like I could write like a Hallmark movie about it or something, but no,
it's amazing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, again, that's a long story, but essentially, so it was a stressor about that, and then, it was a long labor, and I tore, and so, like, just all this stress, so I feel like, in functional medicine, we often look at this, like, timeline of things that have happened, and so you've got all these things occurring, so the, poor diet, the antibiotics, and then there's like always this like stressor that sort of causes sort of everything to go awry, So for some people that, for kids that might be a divorce of their parents that's caused like, a stressor in their life, or, a move or something like that could have caused some anxiety, or death in the family, or, there's lots of different things that could, but for me, I think that, delivery was been a part of my stressor. And so then after that, I started to have a lot of gut issues and bloating and gas and, things like that. And, a year later, finally figured out that was SIBO. But my daughter, I didn't know about probiotics, like much. I mean, I knew about them as a pharmacist, but I didn't know like how important they were for children at that time. So I, found out about, them about probably she was like 5 weeks old when I'm like, you're breastfeeding at night and your daughter is not going to sleep and you're just like, on a lot of moms are like, they feel sort of guilty about you. It's like Googling all night long. Yeah. And so I decided, we had seen a chiropractor, and so that was integral in us figuring out like she was colicky and not sleeping and just screaming. So between the tongue tie that we weren't able to get corrected until about 5 weeks, she was getting a lot of like air in when she was eating. But then also, food intolerances. So I went to the chiropractor, and I'm a Western medicine trained person that has learned a lot about functional medicine, but I don't really understand the muscle testing that they do in the chiropractor office. Like in my mind, like I want to understand it, but I don't. But I know.
Are you talking about like you hold your arm out and they press down on it?
Yes.
Oh, that
like,
is
intolerant.
So woo woo.
Yes.
And I've had that done, and it is the weirdest thing.
It is the weirdest thing, but I literally took out everything that they said that she negatively react to, and she was like a new baby.
Wow.
And you know, we started probiotics at that time too, and so but I was like weird stuff like coconut and like, you know, different dairy. I mean, dairy was included in that and different things.
So more than the hard hitters, more than like the big
gluten and those kinds of things. So it really turned out that I had intestinal permeability, and she was getting like larger proteins than she should have been getting because they weren't breaking down in my gut.
Okay.
And so
during breastfeeding.
But also during pregnancy, because I mean, whatever goes into your bloodstream is going to the placenta. And so that's one of the theories behind a lot of this allergy and immune response is that, you know, mom's guts are leaky or have these inflammation that's contributing to the baby getting those large protein molecules instead of the, you know, smaller broken down molecules that they need. Yeah. So not only is it important to look at, you know, probiotics and microbiome because those can help seal the gut lining and help heal leaky gut, but also, you know, addressing leaky gut, you know, maybe before pregnancy if that's an option, or, you know, even, you know, using supplements maybe that are safe to use in pregnancy depending on, you know, the person's situation. So that was a little bit of a long story, but my daughter then did develop some food allergies. We had started her on probiotics but I wasn't very consistent with them. Yeah. But by about 7 months, she was allergic to egg, almonds. I think almond was a little later that we had discovered, and then what else was she? Peas was another one, and then later, like, we discovered she was allergic to lentils. So now with some gut healing, she's only allergic to peas and lentils. So we've reintroduced eggs and almonds, and she's able to eat any tree nut or peanuts and the eggs as well.
That's exciting.
So it's definitely been a journey, but because of that, with my son, you know, the first day, like I was taking probiotics the entire pregnancy. You know, I had done a lot of gut healing and things along the way, you know, certain herbals and, you know, glutamine and other things that are sort of our protocol for leaky gut. And then and with my son, I took probiotics the entire pregnancy. I took women's flora-specific ones towards, you know, especially during the third trimester, and then gave him those same probiotics, like, you know, just on his tongue, you know, when he was born, like instantly.
Wow.
So took him to the hospital because really that first couple weeks is so important for, because that's when the gut's starting to seed and start to repopulate. Because the challenge with probiotics is that we have to get them to actually start repopulating in the gut. And so the research, some of it's hit or miss on whether, you know, certain strains that we're taking by mouth are actually like growing inside.
Or if you have to like continue taking them.
Right. So if we can get them in that first couple of weeks, then they're going to be part of the, you know, child's normal flora. So that was, and he's been great. I mean, my daughter had eczema because of the food intolerances. My son has not had any issues with eczema or anything like that.
So he just was born basically no issues.
No
sensitivities. Wow.
Well, he did have the lip and tongue tie, which again, genetic or related to mutation fire, because I do have heterozygous mutations for one of the MTHFR genes. But yeah, so he's doing really well. I mean, I can't say I have a study of two, you know,
sure.
Two, but you know, I've seen this in other people's children too, that probiotics make a huge difference. I mean, I even had to take antibiotics for group B strep during the his delivery. But his delivery was like way less stressful. You know, we just prayed and prayed. Yeah. Her doula was there, although we had to have the backup doula. Yes, it was a different doula. We had to have a backup doula because the one that we originally had worked with was going on vacation like the week, after he was due. Okay. So, but the lady we worked with was awesome, and he came a lot faster and on his own. I had gotten a massage, and I was like, hit every point that you're not supposed to hit that induces labor. And the guy was like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm sure. Like, I don't want to have this baby on my own. I don't want to be induced again." So I think that made a huge difference. But yeah, so started him on probiotics at the beginning, and we still do probiotics with him. But I'm not as like, you have to take this every day because I got it in during that first 2 weeks. But if we've gotten any antibiotics, there's definitely studies that show there's less disruption to the microbiome if we take probiotics during the course of antibiotics, even though it's...
As opposed to like trying to catch up after.
Right.
Yeah, because I heard one time that if you ever get to the point where you actually completely eliminate a strain, we don't know yet if you can actually ever get that back. Right. So you really want to protect what you do have.
Yeah, and the probiotic research is challenging. I've been diving into it with an intern that I've been working with because we're trying to write a blog post and potentially have like a class on probiotics in the next month or so. But a lot of them are they're multiple strains are studied at the same time, so they're taking like this combo product, and then you can't say, well, is it this strain or is it this strain that's like causing the effect? So it's a little bit challenging to interpret. And then there's also, the genus, the species, and the strain. So not only is it like lactobacillus, like acidophilus, but it's lactobacillus acidophilus, like a number that is the actual specific strain. So sometimes even the strain, down to the strain level, they might act a little differently than the others. So that's one of the challenging things about probiotic research too. So I mean, I think it's a lot of times trial and error.
That's so fascinating.
I know. Sometimes it's like trial and error between this product and this product for patients to really sort of figure out.
I typically recommend that people rotate products like every 3 months or so so they get a different brand, they get a different strain. They're trying, if someone finds one that they just respond to really quickly and just love it, would you still recommend rotating, or would you just stick with that product?
I mean, if they're doing really well, I would probably just stick with it. But I mean, making sure that they're eating fermented foods and trying to incorporate other strains and variety in their diet would be important probably too.
Yeah. I love, I try to get sauerkraut in every day.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things I try to make Keegan eat every day.
Okay.
And at first he totally was like, oh, I can't do this. I don't like it. And now he's fine with it.
Okay.
It's all right. He does okay. He doesn't love it, but he's like, I'll do it.
Right.
And I think he's really, over the past year, really kind of learned what it is to feel good.
Yeah.
And I think coming from feeling so awful and having such an acute, like he was really sick and he felt really awful. I think he's really started to make the connection when he does, quote unquote cheat or eat something he shouldn't eat, or he goes somewhere and is fed something, or whatever the situation is. And then he's like, don't feel as good, like you need your sauerkraut, you need your probiotics, you need your good food. Yeah, that is so fascinating. So a lot of cool information about the mom and how important it is for their guts to be healthy. That's incredible. Yeah,
and vitamin D levels too, I forgot to mention, are really important in making sure that those are good. There's actually some studies that show like delivery in certain months of the year has increased risk of asthma because this, like if they were pregnant most of the winter. If they were pregnant most of the winter. So it's important to supplement with D. I have a really good blog post on vitamin D, K2, and why you need K2 along with your D to help build your bones with the extra calcium that's absorbed.
That is fascinating. I was just reading something about sunscreen the other day.
Yeah.
And how, so I have 2 redheads in the house. And skin cancer runs in my husband's family, and he's had, skin cancer pieces taken off here and there. And so, they lather up with sunscreen, like on the regular. And I'm just like, I don't like those. It's like carcinogenic chemicals that you're just absorbing every day. And then when you block the sun, really, I mean, you're not even, you're blocking your availability of like absorbing vitamin D and building up your immune system, which, is going to fight cancer, all this stuff. So we actually, I don't know if you've heard about this or not, I'd be curious. There's this little gummy that you can eat called Sun Dots. Have you heard of that? So I know there's natural sunscreens that are like mineral based and all these things that you can get, and I need to do that anyway. But my sister actually recommended this little gummy, which is great for kids. Right. And I can't remember the name of the chemical or vitamin that's in it. It begins with a P. But it's like this Harvard researcher, and she discovered, like in school or whatever, one of these papers that she was trying to write for school, something like that. This chemical or this food or whatever it is, that like internal, like you take it as a vitamin, and it helps protect you from sun damage. Whoa. I know. And
I need some of this before I go to King Food next
week. And so of course on their website they're very much like, use it in addition to sunscreen. I'm sure there's so many legal things that you have to do. But if you want to try it without, Sun Dots. So we just got some because my son is doing band camp 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. outside all day. And I was like, I don't want him like 5 times a day putting this on, so we're gonna try Sun Dots.
Yeah, we've used the Badger brand.
I've heard about that brand.
Young Living has a new mineral sunscreen that's supposed to rub in really well. I tried to order it on my last order and it like didn't ship because like everyone.
That's the thing they said about Badgers. It doesn't rub in very well. So that's
it doesn't. But for my kids, I'm like, well, it's easier if I can just see a white face versus. I feel like the face, for wrinkles and all that kind of stuff, the sun damage was. But like for your arms, I think healthy exposure is important, and then maybe throwing on those like UV protection shirts are what we use a lot.
Yeah, my husband like has the whole gear.
Right.
Oh my gosh,
It's like going diving. Like
he even 100%. He even has like things that go over his head that like cover like everything.
Yeah.
I'm like, that looks great, honey. He's like, well, if we're gonna be out in the sun, I'm gonna have this.
Yeah, there's another brand, Babo, B-A-B-O, that has some natural mineral oil. And they actually have a spray I just ordered. I haven't tried it yet though, because I'm saving it for the Cancun trip. So if it's like all white, I'm just gonna be like all white for the week, I guess. But
nice. Well, you can take some sun dots if you'd like to borrow some sun dots. So okay, so there's a lot that we can do for our bodies to protect current, future babies, pregnancies, all those sorts of things, to make sure they're as strong as they can be when we give birth. But let's say you don't find out until a couple weeks after your pregnancy that gut health is even a thing, and then all of a sudden you start thinking, well, how can I build up my baby's immune system? What can you do for a newborn? At that point, or if they're maybe given a C-section, just as Amy, you were talking about the importance of natural birth. If they're given a C-section.
Yeah, so C-section babies, I would definitely recommend using probiotics. I mean, pretty much any baby, like no mom in the United States or most of the world is got a perfect gut health. And so, so I mean, if yours is better than others, or you haven't had any issues, maybe you don't need to use probiotics as long. Maybe you just do it for a few days, but they're getting exposed to things in the hospital, even if they're there for, a few days. That you may have had to take antibiotics or things like that during the time. But so definitely probiotics. I like the Women's Flora by Claire Labs and the pediatrician actually in Columbus that I was mentioning before, she recommends that during the 3rd trimester, Dr. Kareen. And then when you baby's born, the strains actually in that and the infant probiotic that Claire Labs has are very similar.
So they have an infant. Actually, I was going to ask you about that. So there's a very specific probiotic that you would give children.
Infants, So there's an infant powder, and then there's also Metagenics also has an infant or baby flora that's actually in a drop. So I actually find the Claire Labs ones caused my kids to have a little bit more gas. I mean, I still used it like intermittently at the first couple weeks this time, but I also sort of rotated it with the Ultra Flora Baby, which was a little drop that's in a little bit of sunflower oil.
Just put that right on their tongue?
Yep, put it right on their tongue or on a spoon. Obviously a small infant's not eating out of a spoon yet, but yeah, or if a mom's nursing, they could just drop it on before they start nursing. But for the powder is a little messy to do that with. It's easier just to put it in your mouth a little bit beforehand. But yeah, so that would be a great option. Vitamin D is essential as well for babies. So making sure that they're getting supplemented with probably about 400 IUs to 500 IUs of vitamin D. I generally use the Thorn drops. They're really concentrated, so it's like 1 drop for babies, because it's like MCT oil and vitamin D are like the only ingredients, or there might be like vitamin E or something in there for a preservative, but like a lot of the baby vitamin D that you see at the store has got all kinds of extra crap in it that you don't really need. And so
with your sort of giving your baby this protocol, some probiotics and some vitamin D and things like that, how long would you typically do that?
So my kids, I continue it to give them that, just because they're exposed to other things going on to help their gut. But for sure I would do the vitamin D continually, especially because vitamin D doesn't transfer very well in the breast milk, and most likely mom is probably not optimal vitamin D levels after pregnancy anyways. So the one thing, you could more slow down if it's like summer months and you're outside and you're getting that good sun exposure. But if it's winter months, I would definitely say you probably need to do that. And once they turn 6 months old, you can give them cod liver oil, which has a good balance of vitamin A and vitamin D naturally occurring in the fish oil. So that's
you're getting fish oil and vitamin A and vitamin D. So it's like kind of a one for nice.
Yeah, so a lot of people in the paleo community used to talk about fermented cod liver oil, but then there were some issues with the Green Pastures company that was making that, it was not coming from cod, and it was coming from pollock, and it was this whole, and I tried that stuff, and I took it when I was pregnant with my daughter, but it is awful. It is, they have this, cinnamon flavor that's supposed to be, cinnamon tingle that, oh my goodness, it's horrible. So, it really just tastes like you're eating, something that's not good anymore because it's fermented. So I use Nordic Naturals. I really like Nordic Naturals products for when it comes to fish oils. So they have a cod liver oil that our whole family just takes, after dinner. I put a little on a spoon for my son. My daughter takes some, and my husband and I take a teaspoon of it every day. So So that's a good, all around thing. But I mean, obviously, if your child's getting a lot of omega-3s in their diet, like the nights we eat fish, I don't normally give us cod liver oil because we just had omega-3s, for dinner. But yeah, so those are things I would do continuously, and you can get vitamin D levels checked in children. So like my son was getting his iron checked of the year, and I also had his vitamin D checked at that time. And so right now, for kids, I would probably want their vitamin D above 40 at least, if not, in the 40. In most people, we want it to like the 40 to 60 range. Especially, but we want to make sure that they're getting good vitamin K as well, because the vitamin K again puts the calcium into the bones and helps it not to stay in the arteries, which in adults, would contribute to more calcified arteries issues and potentially cardiovascular disease. So I think that's why in the studies we see that people with really high levels of vitamin D in these calcium vitamin D trials had more increased risk of cardiovascular disease because they were getting that calcium. It wasn't going to the right place because they were lacking other minerals like magnesium and so they were just studying these isolated nutrients instead of all the nutrients that need to be put when you need to put into the calcium into the bones. So
cofactors is important.
So when we just study one nutrient, a lot of times the data doesn't always come back great because if you think about nature, like we're never just like normally picking up like one nutrient. Like an apple doesn't have like one vitamin in it. There's lots of different things going on there. So. So and then at 6 months too, if someone's breastfeeding, iron stores are pretty much depleted after 6 months in the child. So most of the time, iron is not obtained very well in the breast milk, and so a lot of people tend to need to supplement iron at that point. But for my children, I waited too long for my son to get his iron tested, and he got to the point where he almost had like the restless, adults get restless leg syndrome when they have iron deficiency. His ferritin, I think, was like 13, and it should be like 30 at least. And so, but in the scale, if you look at like the normal labs, like that looks normal on the lab. So the doctor's like, oh, it's fine. It's so,
just so everybody knows, ferritin's like your backup store of iron.
Right.
So because I've actually had this happen. Was his iron were his iron numbers actually in the right range? And
they were, but
low?
still like on the lower end of normal.
Okay, and then his ferritin's low.
But still, he like within a week he was sleeping better and settling down better of supplementing with iron carbonyl. So I mean, he like wants supplements. I give him his little like this iron I found on Amazon. It's called Renzo's, but it's like a dissolvable tablet. I mean, iron has come a long way. My husband was iron deficient. His sister was iron deficient, so it sort of runs in like that side of the family. Plus the fact that breastfeeding doesn't provide a great source of iron, but. Yeah, so my husband, like, he used to have these horrible tasting iron tablets he would, like, throw in the trash, like, and tell his mom that he took them. And then, like, here's my son, like, give me another. But obviously iron can be dangerous if it's overdosed, so definitely something to keep up out of the way.
So how do you check that in an infant?
So they draw the lab. So, I mean, he was a year, so they just drew it from his arm. And generally they probably wouldn't do it any sooner than 6 months unless there was some kind of, disease process that they were trying to work up. But but yeah, a lot of times they'll check lead and some things at a year. So, I was like, well, I'll just wait till a year until he's got to get that, done as well. So yeah. And it's funny because I don't remember ever getting labs when I was a kid, until I was like an adult. And now
I remember getting shots.
Right.
But I never had to get any.
Yeah, and I always feel so horrible with my daughter when I want to check like her allergy IgE responses to see like where she's at with the pea and lentil, because she's just like a mess after they do that. So I think as they get older, they're more aware of all of that going on. She had one bad experience where the phlebotomist sort of like dug her out a little bit, and oh my goodness, it was
traumatic. It's traumatic for an adult, much less for a child.
I know.
That's just awful.
Yeah. So probiotics, omega-3s are either, if they're not doing the cod liver oil, there's children's omega-3 chewies. I think Nordic Naturals has some that we've used. My daughter calls them they're actually shaped like a fish.
Okay. That's cool. They gotta make it fun, right?
Yeah, but they have like an Omega Junior, like mango flavored omega-3 supplement too that kids can take as well.
So what would you say in terms of the importance of breastfeeding versus, I know some people are physically unable to. So kind of talk about maybe both sides of that, like the importance if you can, and of course if you cannot, like what are some things to do? Yeah, so if you can, at least try. Like I always I've seen some moms as like patients that are like, oh yeah, I'm not going to breastfeed. And it's like, well, can you like at least try and give them like the colostrum for the first week? Because that's got so many good nutrients that help sort of seal the gut lining. Because babies are born with a leaky gut because they need to get protein absorbed. And so, that needs to be able to go through, their gut lining.
and they don't do, I mean, just drinking isn't quite the same digestive stimulating process as, you know, when we chew and things like that as far as stimulating digestive enzymes. But, you know, breast milk has been studied as far as, like, it has prebiotics in it, and so essentially then it feeds the good bacteria, and so they've compared babies that are breastfed versus babies that aren't, and found the babies that are breastfed have more of the beneficial bifidobacteria, and so, which is shown again to decrease risk of allergies and asthma and things like that. And so I think with those people that are unable to do, you know, to breastfeed, I mean, I know multiple people that are unable despite, you know, their attempts at that. It's really important, again, the same interventions, you know, making sure they have the probiotics and maybe something with a little bit of a prebiotic in it as well.
Would you actually, in that case, if they cannot breastfeed, use colostrum as a supplement?
I don't know that I would use it like in a child, just because I don't know if there's any research with that.
Sure.
But so I'm not going to publicly say
no,
that's a good idea.
I was curious because that is one of the supplements that I use with a lot of my clients, because it boosts your IgA. And
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be interesting. I think a lot of the studies of colostrum have been done like athletic performance, because high intense exercise can actually contribute to some leaky gut because of the stress that occurs there. So they found that, you know, giving IgG colostrum type supplements afterwards like helps prevent that, you know, damage to the gut lining, and but also in like leaky gut situations helps modulate the immune response. So but I think, you know, that could be considered, but I'd probably make sure to work with a pediatrician or somebody that's like, you know, Dr. Green or something that knows what she's doing with all of those things. But she was, last time I talked to her about that, she was mentioning that like it can increase growth factor or growth hormone, and so you know, there may be some applications there. I don't know, but yeah, I know.
So much interesting stuff.
Yes. So, but I mean, obviously the formula has come a long way. With, you know, the types of formula that are available versus, you know, what was available in the 80s when I was formula fed. I think some of the formula products do have some prebiotic fibers put in, which would be, you know, good ones to choose. But then also we have like the hydrolyzed formulas. So we've got like the milk protein, but then ones that are more sensitive, like the Similac Sensitive has a hydrolyzed version of the protein. So if kids are not able to break down the dairy protein very well, then they can have this hydrolyzed version, and sometimes they do a lot better as far as the gas and, you know, crying times and things like that. But even some kids are even more sensitive to that and can't have, you know, the dairy protein at all. There are some dairy-free versions. So the Alimentum Ready Feed is actually dairy and corn-free, because corn can also be a trigger for a lot of people's food sensitivities. And so I have a good friend who's also a pharmacist. Both her sons were corn intolerant, and the one was actually, she sort of came a journey with him because her daughter was like, you know, perfect health, no problems, easy baby, and then her son, you know, had this corn intolerance, and she unfortunately was not able to breastfeed very long, and so she put him on formula, and then like kept trying all these other formulas, and one of like the dairy-free formulas actually made him worse, to the point where he was like not eating. He was hospitalized at like probably about 8 months, and then she went to this integrative pediatrician that I've been mentioning, and, you know, she explained everything that's going on, and the doctor was like, he's intolerant to corn, because he got worse when you gave him this all corn-based formula. She took corn out of his diet, and he was like a new kid. The reflux meds come off. I mean, at that point he was probably on 2 or 3 meds for the reflux. He had to work with like food, you know, just like retraining how to eat, because he had so much pain that he was just not wanting to eat anymore. So it's definitely like foods can affect, you know, kids even at that, you know, young age. And so definitely working, you know, with someone that knows what they're doing. But there's multiple formula options. But I would say, you know, for kids that really are struggling, you know, whether it's eczema related to corn or dairy, you know, trying that Alimentum Ready Feed might be good. It's really expensive though. That's the challenge. It's like $10 a bottle, which is crazy.
What age do babies start? I mean, can you start using, you know, you could blend up your own foods, for example, as opposed to
about 6 months.
Okay, so you don't have to push through too long if you are going to go for the expensive.
They still do need formula probably until a year, but
you're supplementing with some other things.
With some other things, yes, they're getting good nutrition. Yeah, I normally start with avocado. With my kids, and the 6 months, something that's like, sort of sweet, but it's like the super, I think my kid already ate a whole avocado today, and it's, like 3
Oh, Keegan loves it. He loves, see, I like guacamole. It's got a little bit of flavor to it, right? He will actually eat the avocado out of the skin.
My daughter did that for a long time, and when she got introduced to guacamole, she's like, no, I just want
of course, it's got more flavor.
So those like cups that you can buy, like at
the
Costco,
holy guacamole,
So
those are my favorite. It's like just the right amount of seasoning,
right?
And it's like the little
it
individual
doesn't turn
cups.
brown. You don't have to worry about it. It's too ripe.
But there's nothing bad in it. I mean, it's
like onion and salt and something like that.
It's amazing. I love it.
So introducing foods at 6 months and making sure they're healthy foods and avoiding, even the American Association of Family Medicine Physicians has said like really kids shouldn't get juice, even though the country is, every kid looks like they're drinking juice, but really that should not be a staple in their diet just because it's really just sugar. Even though it's natural sugar sometimes, but a lot of the kids' products aren't actually natural. They're extra sugar.
So let's talk a little bit specifically about allergies.
Yes.
So obviously your daughter was more or less born with them. But what about, if someone is sort of healthy and 8, 9, 10, I know a lot can sort of show up during puberty, and there's so many changes, and all of a sudden they're allergic to everything, or they're developing these different issues and reactions. What would your response
so I mean, definitely addressing the gut and seeing, if there's an imbalance. I mean, at that age, you could do some testing to see,
for sure,
with like the stool test to see if there's any inflammation going on.
I will say from personal experience,
it's probably harder.
It's so funny because poor Patrick, he has to do it with him, and he's like, all right, we're gonna do your stool test this morning, and Keegan's like, okay. now they know how to do it, and he's totally fine, but it's like the first time. So I can't imagine, but he's like, 13 the first time we did it. So, oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
But there's actually, I have a blog post on the blog called Allergic Rhinitis. And
what is your blog?
My blog is Farm to Table, so PHARM like pharmacist, TO table.life, LIFE.com was like $5,000, and so I had to go with something different.
.com, did you say?
.com was $5,000, so I had to go with the .life for now. But I feel like it's like a mixture of like my life and other things going on. But it's talking about the allergic rhinitis and the relationship to the gut. But in there, I talk a little bit about, some of the common things that you can do, like nasal saline and rinsing the, nasal passage out, because everything we're exposed through during the day, we get exposed through our airways. And that's where our body starts to mount immune response, especially when we're talking like seasonal allergies. And so, the neti pots, I know an 8-year-old's probably not going to want to use a neti pot, but, you can still do sinus rinses. There's a little bit of evidence that the Xlear, I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but it's Xlear. It's actually a xylitol nasal spray. It's got saline and xylitol. And there's some evidence that people with chronic sinusitis actually do better with the xylitol one versus the regular saline, because it sort of inhibits bacterial and viral adhesions.
Really? That's so interesting.
Yeah. So I actually do find it seems to be more effective. They have nasal sprays and different things like that. So that might be something to check out. A short course of nasal steroids is not going to be an issue for, a young kid. But really, like, especially to get through like a really bad part of allergy season. But certainly looking at the gut, because it takes time to heal the gut. It's not going to be like, okay, it's allergy season, we've got all these symptoms.
Right.
Like, all right, probiotics are going to make it amazing today.
Yeah.
It's probably not. But
but taking the time to get to the underlying cause.
Right.
Like why are you all of a sudden expressing this?
Right.
Yeah.
So do they have did that winter they had got sick 3 times and they had antibiotics, and that contributed to maybe the worsening of allergies. Or they moved to a different area, like Miami Valley.
Oh my gosh, this is the worst place ever.
So many
but
allergies.
One thing I do like to say is just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal.
Right, exactly.
So just because everybody has allergies does not mean that is what is supposed to happen. But yeah, this area it's tough for people.
Yeah, so they looked at, this one's like meta-analysis. It was 16 clinical trials looking at allergic rhinitis, and found that 9 of the 12 studies had shown improvement with probiotics with allergic rhinitis.
Wow.
So I personally
all that tells you is a lot of the stuff is gut based, and there's some sort of dysbiosis going on, and overgrowth or an undergrowth, suppression.
Most of those studies, again, they were using like different probiotic products, so it's hard to say, but a lot of them were using lactobacillus species, particularly lactobacillus casei, acidophilus, paracaseae, and rhamnose. And rhamnose has a lot of good evidence for leaky gut and helping the inflammation in the gut. But then some of the studies did include probiotics that had bifidobacterium strains. So again, for most people, if they're not, going to pay for a $500, gut test, or although Genova's prices are getting a little lower, so I'm really excited about that. Starting August 1st, but I think just an overall like good balance of strains to start out with is important. But I really like the orthobiotic for adults from Orthomolecular because it has in the 20 billion one, it has SAC-B in it, which is Saccharomyces boulardii.
Yep, I love
yeah,
that
and so
probiotic.
I mean, there's like lots of papers on this, but just
Yes.
like telling about all the like awesome things it can do. The one thing to be cautious is that there are some studies about people getting a fungal blood infection from taking that probiotic that were immunocompromised. So I would not give SAC-B to like an immunocompromised infant, maybe like a preterm baby or someone that has, chemo or, some kind of HIV, some reason that their body is immunocompromised. So, but otherwise, it's a great one. And there's, small cases, but it's still something to be mindful of. But then there's also Bifidobacterium lactis, which is in the product that has studies on immune response and hypersensitivities to environmental allergens. So, and then the same company, Orthomolecular, has something called Flora Boost, which if kids aren't swallowing capsules, it's just like a scoop they could put in a smoothie or applesauce or something like that. And
That's
you can
really
always
smart,
open a capsule too to. I
Blend
do
it in,
that a lot when my daughter's sick. I'm like, okay, here's the vitamin C, here's the, this, IgG, everything.
Speaking of vitamin C, that's such a good one too.
Yeah.
You can almost not overdose on that. You're just gonna poop it out.
Right.
But doing like a tablet is really great just because a lot of the chewables have so much garbage in them. Oh my gosh. When I used to do the chewables all the time, and I finally,
lots of extra
wisened up, and I started looking at it, I was like, whoa, there's like colors in here, and sugar's the number one ingredient.
Right.
I'll just swallow something.
Right. Yeah.
No more chewing.
Yes. Young Living does have a pretty good vitamin C chewable, though. It's not quite as tasty as the other store ones that are more sweet, but it is good. But it has some essential oils in it, so with kids, it's probably not the greatest option to consume the oils. But and then Clear Labs also the Therabiotic Complete or the women's formula would be fine too. But other nutrients that are really important for allergic rhinitis and the gut healing. So there's a product they have called D-Hist that has like quercetin in it. So quercetin is like a natural antihistamine. It also helps with like the inflammation in the gut. It also has some vitamin C and some bromelain in it, so that can really help with some of those like symptoms early on.
Quercetin is something that a lot of people use in the athletic circles.
Yeah, so it's actually in the Shakeology.
Yeah, is it?
I think so.
Is it actually? So, that's so fast. I should know that if it is. But is it? Does that like boost your energy a little bit? I'm trying to think of what I know about that one.
Yeah, I don't know much about.
Or is that more of like a recovery thing?
It's more of a recovery thing and like inflammation and the antihistamine piece.
Sure.
So, but yeah, N-acetylcysteine is also really good for sort of a natural antihistamine. So that product together, the D-Hist plus the probiotics, and they actually have a kids D-Hist chewable. It's not the tastiest, and they're like a little bit hard.
So I was researching like histamine intolerance recently.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about having a lot of allergies, one of the things to kind of think about is if you do have like a histamine intolerance, taking over-the-counter allergy meds can actually suppress your production of the enzymes that help you break those down and get rid of them. So I thought that was really interesting because our first instinct is to go, whatever, Allegra or Zyrtec or whatever it is. But those can actually suppress your enzyme production that allows you to get rid of the histamines, and it's like an overabundance.
Like the DAO enzyme.
Yeah, the DAO, and it's like too much histamine in your body. It's not that you're sensitive to histamine; it's just that you have too much of it. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I was also histamine intolerant at one point before I started, because when you have leaky gut, you have less of that DAO enzyme because it's sort of produced by some of the good bacteria and everything like that. So. There are certain strains of bacteria that actually cause histamine production, so you also have to be careful about the probiotics that cause. Specifically, Lactobacillus casei is one that is in a lot of things, including like it's a good one in yogurt and different things like that. And so that one, Bulgarcius, that one is in a lot of yogurt products. Streptococcus, Thermophilus. And
isn't it just so much fun to say?
I know, sorry. I'm gonna look at my notes here. But Lactobacillus, delbrueckii, and Helicobacillus. Sorry, I should know how to say these better. But
no, they're tough.
It's not something like I specifically talk about all the time. But those ones, can cause more histamine instead of degrade the histamine. So, but that orthobiotic product I mentioned, all the strains in there help degrade histamine. So it's another reason that I recommend that a lot for patients. So probiotics, getting their the D-Hist supplement that has a lot of the good nutrients in it. And then vitamin D levels is also important in the allergy and immune response process. And so I can't, almost every single time I check someone's vitamin D, it's less than 20 if I'm like initially, checking it. And so trying to make sure that they get those back up to a normal range is really important. But if your vitamin D is less than 20, think about like what your other nutrients probably are.
Where's
too.
your immune system? It's hard. I think even when we eat as well as we can, and we try really hard, sometimes it's hard to get as many nutrients in your. So I like greens powders and all these different things where they pull from different parts of the world, and you're getting like, I just started like using a new greens powder. I'll actually put it in my Shakeology. Like Shakeology has like a million different things in it already, but then I'll like put some little greens in. But it's got like this algae blend, so it's got like kelp and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I love that because algae is just like so nutrient dense for your body.
And trying to get all that. I cannot do those seaweed snacks.
You can't? I tried those. Oh my gosh, the little crunchies. You can mix them in. You can just eat them plain. I actually think they taste really good.
Really? Oh my goodness, no, I cannot do that. I tried it. My husband tried it too, and we're like,
so good for you if you can do it.
Yes. Go ahead and try it, listeners, but don't buy a huge box until
sea snacks or whatever.
Something.
So good for you if you can do it. So that's awesome. So, all right. So nutrient density is really important. Certain vitamins are really important. Healing the gut and finding if you have any food allergies is really, really important. And all that would transfer to adulthood as well. If you find all of a sudden, like one of my clients the other day said, I can remember the day that my allergies started. I never had allergies before. And so, it was like something was a triggering event for her, like you were talking about earlier. There's only so much that your body can handle, and then something seemingly small happens in your life. But that is the overburden of stress for your body, and that's what does it. And then boom, something shows up as like this major symptom. You got to take care of it.
I had a 19-year-old runner in the office yesterday that all of a sudden just has like exercise-induced asthma like since February, and so it's like trying to figure out, with a college student, like he doesn't have much, money to do all these diagnostic testing, like what is the trigger for him? And so for him, I'm doing a lot of empiric stuff and checking his vitamin D and recommending probiotics, and curcumin is great for inflammation too, so that might be something in that early stage of healing the gut that is important as well. But
in terms of nutrition, do you normally make any sort of broad recommendations when you're talking about inflammation and sort of calming people's immune systems down?
So generally like a paleo type diet is generally what we recommend, like trying to remove the dairy and the gluten to see if that helps improve the symptoms. But some people, depending on how extensive their leaky gut symptoms are, and like if they're reacting to eggs and reacting to, because you start to remove the dairy and gluten, and then you start eating more eggs, and you start eating more, and if you don't heal the gut in that process, then you start to become, sensitive to those things as well. So, and sometimes I feel like it's really overwhelming for people that don't eat like that on a normal basis. So we try to, start with the elimination, or even like a whole 30 for like, let's try this for 30 days and then like reintroduce.
Reminding them constantly, it's a short-term thing. We got to figure out what's right for your body. And sometimes 30 days isn't long enough, but it's enough time for them to feel better most of the time, because they've removed a lot of the triggers. Because in that, you're not eating any grains or dairy, and I don't think any beans, sugar. And sugar is a huge, trigger for inflammation, and all this allergic processed sugar, mostly.
And all this allergic disease is really related to inflammation. And so if sugar is feeding inflammation, then
really, I think that's the answer in almost any disease you look at. I mean, if you do like your little reverse engineering of disease, you have disease, and where does that come from? We have chronic inflammation in the body. Well, where does that come from? Well, a lot of times it starts in the gut. Well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from mental, emotional, physical stress, food sensitivities, the stuff that you're eating, the chemicals we're exposed to.
I think the piece that's hardest to help them with is the chemicals you've exposed to piece. I went to a recent, it was called a Personalized Lifestyle Medicine conference in May, and they presented all this data about these different chemicals in our environment and how it's like even more linked to diabetes than the rise in sugar consumption and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well that's great, but what do I do with that information? Like, it's not very easy to test patients for these things yet, and so obviously we can do things like, we know BPA is bad for our bodies. We can drink out of BPA-free containers, and try not to use plastics. But when you're going to a store and you're getting a receipt,
hard.
you know, and they're handing you the receipt, which
Plastic
has
water
that on
bottles,
it.
yeah.
And so
it is hard. I think the goal really has to be the things that are in our control in terms of stressors is, you know, and food is like the primary one, right? And so that's something we have control over every single time we put something in our mouth. And so if we take personal responsibility for the ones that we can actually control, hopefully that lessens the burden on our body to the extent that the things we can't control don't make it worse, as much of a difference, and our body can kind of handle itself. Because it's really good at doing its job, but we just have to get it to the point where it can do that, you know.
And I've heard, too, other functional medical practitioners describing allergic rhinitis as sort of like an initial autoimmune disease, because it's really like this inflammation that's being created in response to like these allergens, but it is sort of attacking your tissue and your nasal passages and different things like that. So really, you know, those patients are probably more prone, if we know this is from a leaky gut type thing, to, we have so many people with Hashimoto's and so many people with, you know, IBD, irritable bowel disease, with Crohn's and things like that, that it's, you know, such on the rise. And, you know, a lot of people, we finding that we have to address that by healing the gut, but it'd be so much better if we could heal it before they get some of these autoimmune diseases. Because once we have an autoimmune disease, we can't completely reverse it. We can
your body always knows how to produce those
Mm-hmm.
antibodies once it's done it.
And so that's the challenge. But there's some awesome evidence, even Hashimoto's, giving, you know, selenium, and, you know, I've had, you know, some patients that like decrease their antibodies in half, you know, and some other things that
makes sense, because one of the biggest things with autoimmunity is nutrient deficiencies. A lot of every single one has leaky gut. It's a precursor. It's like a given. If you have autoimmunity, you have a leaky gut. Like, it's been studied. And then most of them have these extreme nutrient deficiencies. And one of the things I like about the AIP protocol is that the foods that they really intentionally bring in through that process helps balance those nutrient deficiencies. So you were just talking about magnesium, selenium, things like that. And so it's not just, I always, when I'm talking to somebody about maybe doing that protocol, it's not just about...
It's a hard one, too.
It is tough. And it's not just about what you're bringing out, though. It's also about what you're bringing in. That's just as or more important, because that's where the healing comes in. That's where the nutrient density comes in. Because it's really easy when you get to the elimination phase where you're like, I can't eat these things, to then have such an extremely, like, limited diet because you don't know what to eat. So the bringing in is harder. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like AIP too. In my practice, I don't always have the patients that are like seeking functional medicine. Like they're here for like their appointment, and I'm like, here, this is what, you know, is probably an issue. Sometimes we have patients, you know, I work closely with our nurse practitioner, and we're working on some cool like functional medicine group visits and a new protocol for the office. So sometimes we have people seeking us for that, but other times it's just like my patients with diabetes that I'm like, well, tell them about that diarrhea and the constipation that you've been having, and then I'm throwing out like, hey, you should be doing this, and they're like, oh, I did not come to talk to you about that today. You know, like, it is so hard. It is so hard.
If you
Sometimes you have to
like,
preface it with like, okay, this is what I do in case you're interested. You can come to me for this. This is what I do a lot of the time, but it's hard because people about their food, it's just it's very personal. There's an emotional attachment. There's a fear, I think, associated with letting it go. You know, it's a very interesting thing, and I actually have thought I need to work with like a psychologist sometimes.
I did in my last practice.
Did you? It's like you need. It's very hard sometimes when you're trying to do every aspect of it on your own through the coaching or whatever, because you'll hit someone that just really struggles, and I'm like, I can't help you. Like, I really want to, and I think I sort of kind of know what's going on, or at least the direction it needs to go, but I'm not good at that, and I don't know how to address
therapy type things are like amazing. I did a study with diabetes patients, and we did a group visit with myself, a physician, and a clinical psychologist, and that was huge to have her in that group to be able to like drive those like, you know, barriers, and why can't we make this change, or why bother, you know, doing these things, and, you know, really pulling out from people, you know, what those are interesting. So
like, why are you so connected to this food? So it's like, you know, anytime I feel like there's something in your life that you can't give up, when you say, hey, can I give it up for, you know, 2 weeks? If your answer is no, there's a problem. You know, there's some hold that has on your life. Like, you should be able to give up anything for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So Yeah, that's just a really interesting. That's a whole other.
It's hilarious. I was at an obesity seminar last week, and they were talking. A doctor that is really involved in obesity clinic at UC was talking about a lot of their patients that had a history of abuse, and how many of those are connected to the obesity they're experiencing from just like
feeling unworthy,
or wanting to not look pretty because they didn't want someone to be coming and attacking them in that way. So yeah, it's crazy like what people are dealing with inside that we don't always see when we're just looking at labs and things like that. So the whole person is,
and then there's so much that goes into it just from like a mental emotional aspect and how much that affects and I mean your thoughts affect the way your body interprets things, and so there's like that whole aspect. It's just so intense.
I know.
So
I would
much to
say
learn.
during my journey, like a recovery from the SIBO and everything, like the more stressed I was, the worse it all got. And it's like you have to really get past that. And acupuncture was really helpful for me, but there's a lot of other.
I love acupuncture. Yes. Yeah. I actually, cause I really don't like recommending things to my clients unless I've tried them. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I really want to start recommending acupuncture, or at least look into it. I'm learning about it more. So I did it a couple times, and I thought I would totally freak out because I hate needles. Yeah. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. I even did a dry needling too, which like goes way deeper and all that kind of stuff. It's very similar to acupuncture, but it doesn't use the same points and it goes a lot deeper. And so that was fine too. I know. I try. I'm a little guinea pig. I'm like, let's try
a lot of what I teach patients is stuff that I've learned either from my experience or from my daughter's, like researching for my daughter or researching for myself, and so that's one of the reasons why gut health is a big part of our practice, but.
So, Melody, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's tell everybody where they can find you. You have an awesome blog, so share that once again.
Yes,
where are you on social media?
Yes, farmtotable.life, so PHARM2TO life, farm to table. I forgot the table part. That's important. Farmtotable.life, LIFE. And I'm also on Instagram, same thing, at farmtotable.life, and on Facebook as well. So, hoping to gear up again some more information about probiotics and class opportunities, webinars, type things in the next month or so. So
that's amazing. Well, I'm gonna have to have you come on because I'm super fascinated into the concept of therapeutic probiotic use in terms of like I'm doing a lot of research with that with my clients and like targeting and finding specific probiotics for what they're struggling with, a lot along the same lines of what you're talking about. And there's so much research out there and it's so fascinating. So I would love to like do a whole episode just on that.
There's a lot of research. I think there's more research in the side of deficiencies, and so we see like these correlations between less of this bacteria's increased risk of these disorders. We have some research in the treatment side, but not as much.
I was looking into specific probiotics for parasites that work against parasites. And so there's a little bit, and like you're saying, I don't think there's a lot, but there's a little bit of research there. I'm like, this is so cool. You never know, like in the next 50 years, if you can just have this personalized probiotic therapy as your quote-unquote medication.
Yeah, because we can like, they have the what's called uBiome, where you can get your like sequenced, microbiome and what's going on in your gut.
I would get all the tests in the world. I just got the 23andMe. I was like, I'm just curious. I want to know what this is. And they tell you all your genes and everything. I would totally get like all the different versions of the stool test. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it would just be amazing if you could like just plug that into like some other website that would just tell you like, oh, this is what your probiotics look like. This is what it should be. Here's what you need to take. Sort of thing.
I think it's Viome. You said uBiome. I think there's another one called Viome. And it has an app that comes with it where it's like a stool test, and then it reports. It's like, okay, this is like what you have. This is what you need to eat to be more balanced. I mean, it's that's like cool. There's stuff coming out like that, which is pretty neat.
The Genova one gives you a pretty good report as well, the GI test. So lots of different options.
Well, we're just gonna have so much to talk about. So we're gonna have you on in August and then in September. And
sounds good.
All right, thanks, Melody.
No problem.
Yay! That was really interesting. That was super duper interesting. I think people are gonna freak out about